Your house is lying to you right now. Every summer you turn that thermostat down, watch that power bill climb past $300, and tell yourself this is just how it works. This is the price of surviving the heat. But here is what nobody has told you. Your great grandparents, the ones who lived in eastern Kentucky and the Tennessee Hill Country and the red clay flats of Georgia, survived temperatures above 110 degrees Fahrenheit with zero air conditioning. No window units, no ceiling fans pulling amperage from the grid, no subscriptions to anything. And they didn't just survive. They worked full days, raised children, put food up, and slept soundly through August nights, not because they were tougher than you, because they understood something about heat, about air, about water, and about the earth beneath their feet that the air conditioning industry quietly made sure you would never have to know. That knowledge is what this video is about. Not every single trick is real. Every one of them works, and not one of them costs you a dollar. Picture the summer of 1936, the worst heat wave in recorded American history. Temperatures cracked 100 degrees in every single state. An estimated 5,000 Americans died. And yet, deep in the hollows of Appalachia, in the log-framed, tin-roofed, wide-porch farmhouses of Kentucky and Tennessee and Virginia, families were doing something remarkable. They were managing, not suffering. It's managing. Grandmothers were pulling cold buttermilk from spring houses where the water ran 53 degrees even in August. Families were sleeping on screened porches under the stars, cooled by the same night breeze that had cooled those hills since before the Revolution. Grandfathers were rising before dawn, finishing field work by 10 in the morning, and retreating to the shade of a white oak tree the way their fathers had. Children were swimming in creek holes so cold they made your bones ache. The houses themselves, the dog-trot breezeways, the 14-foot ceilings, the deep wraparound porches, were not primitive. They were engineered. These were climate systems built from wood and stone and ancient observation. And then, between 1950 and 1980, in a span of about 30 years, nearly all of it was abandoned. So what changed? And more importantly, what did they know that we've completely forgotten? Before we get into all 25, I want to ask you something directly. Drop it in the comments right now. What is your electric bill hitting this summer? Because I'm willing to bet it is higher than it should be. And I'm willing to bet you've tried fans, blackout curtains, smart thermostats, all of it, and you're still sweating through July like something is broken. Nothing is broken. You were just handed the wrong instructions. Because what you're about to discover will change how you think about heat, comfort, and survival forever. Here is where the modern version fails. By 1960, only 12% of American homes had any form of air conditioning. By 1980, that number had climbed to 55%. And right alongside that curve, a rising line of electric bills, power grid fragility, and a quiet, wholesale erasure of every architectural and behavioral strategy people had spent centuries developing. The Carrier Corporation in 1951 ran an explicit advertising campaign arguing that air conditioning made porches, basements, attic fans, and movable windows obsolete. Think about what they were selling, not comfort, dependency. They were telling Americans to seal their houses shut, pour electricity through a compressor, and pay for the privilege every single month for the rest of their lives. Your great-grandmother didn't need a subscription to survive summer. She needed knowledge. And that knowledge was systematically dismantled, dismissed as backward, and replaced with a product. Here's the part that should make you angry. The industry didn't just sell you a machine. They sold you a worldview, that the old ways were primitive, that comfort required infrastructure, that heat was a problem only technology could solve. When the truth is that across 2,000 years of human habitation in hot climates, people had developed extraordinary solutions. Solutions that physicists now study in universities, solutions that the U.S. Department of Energy is actively trying to revive. The failure was never yours. You were handed a broken map. So let's rebuild the real one. 25 tricks, all of them verified, all of them documented in primary sources from the Foxfire Oral History series, from WPA Federal Writers Project interviews at the Library of Congress, from architectural history and peer-reviewed building science. Let's start where the air lived. Trick 1 through 5, working with air. The first and most powerful trick rural Americans used wasn't a trick at all. It was a house design called the dog trot, two separate log pins connected by an open-air breezeway under a single shared roof. The breezeway acted like a natural wind tunnel, using what engineers now call the Venturi effect, air accelerating as it squeezes through a narrow passage. One pen held the kitchen, isolating all that cooking heat from the sleeping space. The other held the bedrooms, the breezeway in between. That's where the family actually lived in summer. That's where the rocking chairs were. That's where people slept on the hottest nights. The dog liked it too, hence the name. Frederick Law Olmsted described visiting one in Louisiana in 1850 and marveling at how cool the corridor felt compared to the outside. The Jacob Wolf House in Arkansas and Sam Houston's home in Texas are still standing examples. This was not primitive construction, this was climate engineering. Sleeping porches were the second piece of the system, and they swept the nation between 1900 and 1940. Screened second-story extensions of the main house, elevated to catch breezes above the still hot ground air. In 1910, President Taft had one built on the White House roof. Sears sold prefabricated sleeping porch kits. Now, they work because the walls and floors of an interior room absorb heat all day and radiate it back all night. Sleeping inside meant sleeping inside a slow oven. The porch bypassed the whole problem. Here's where it gets remarkable. The shotgun house, one room wide, rooms lined up front to back with no hallways, isn't just a symbol of Southern working-class architecture. It is a cross-ventilation machine. Open the front door and the back door and air flows straight through. The transom windows above the door frames, those little operable panels you've probably never thought about, were designed to release the ceiling layer of hot air while keeping the living space below cooler. Research from Drexel University using computational fluid dynamics confirmed that this kind of cross-ventilation could reduce indoor temperatures by up to 11.5 degrees Fahrenheit below outdoor peaks. Double-hung window, where both the top and bottom sections slide, were another piece of the system. Lower the top sash a few inches and hot air escapes from the ceiling layer. Raise the bottom sash and cooler air enters at floor level. That combination, across opposite walls, created a continuous passive airflow that required no electricity and no moving parts. And the chimneys. Even in summer with no fire burning, a masonry chimney absorbs solar heat through its dark exterior, warming the air inside the flue. Warm air rises, that creates a low pressure zone at the base of the chimney that pulls air in through lower windows on the opposite side of the house. Engineers call it the stack effect. Appalachian families called it good sense. Every element worked together, not as separate tricks. Trick 6 through 10, the cold that was always there. Here's something your great-grandparents understood that most people have completely forgotten. The Earth itself is a refrigerator. At 10 feet underground, the temperature in most of Appalachia stays between 45 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, every year, regardless of what the thermometer reads at the surface. Root cellars exploited this completely, dug into hillsides or below the kitchen floor. A well-built root cellar maintained 40 to 50 degrees in summer, keeping cured meats, dairy, canned vegetables, apples, and cider without a single watt of electricity. Walk down those stone steps in August, and the temperature would drop 30 to 40 degrees in the span of 10 steps. Families also retreated to root cellars on the hottest afternoons, sitting there to rest. Spring houses took this even further. A spring house is a small stone structure built directly over a natural spring, so the water flows continuously through the interior. Spring water emerges from underground at a constant 50 to 55 degrees, regardless of season. Stoneware crocks of milk, butter, and cheese were set directly in the water channel. The Chenoweth Spring House in Kentucky dates to 1786. And Scots-Irish settlers in Appalachia specifically chose homesteads based on the presence of a hillside spring, not for farming convenience, but because the spring house was their refrigerator, and without it, summer survival was exponentially harder. Well, water worked the same physics on a simpler scale. Underground water in the eastern U.S. maintains 50 to 55 degrees year-round. Children were sent to the well or spring multiple times each day. Adults splashed their faces and wrists. Our soaked cloths set buckets in rooms. Cold water drawn from 30 feet down and brought into a room at 95 degrees doesn't just feel refreshing, it actively absorbs heat from the surrounding air. And creek swimming wasn't recreation, it was physiological necessity. The mountain streams of Appalachia run 50 to 65 degrees in August, fed by those same underground springs. If you've ever jumped into a mountain creek in July, you know exactly what I'm describing. That cold that makes you gasp, and then 10 seconds later makes you feel completely human again. The science behind it is striking. Water conducts heat roughly 70 times faster than air. Cold water immersion cools a heat-stressed body at approximately twice the rate of passive rest in shade. These weren't swimming holes. They were medicine. Trick 11 through 17. Body, fabric, and food. There is a reason fieldwork stopped between roughly 10 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon across the entire rural American South. And it wasn't laziness. A Monroe County, Georgia oral history documented it plainly. All work simply ceased, not just the men picking cotton, but clerks and storekeepers as well. This was the American siesta, and it wasn't cultural. It was survival. Working hard in 100-degree heat is not heroic. It is how people die. Oh, the flip side of that rhythm was rising before dawn to accomplish the most physically demanding work in the 2 or 3 coolest hours of the morning. Harvest, plowing, hauling, all of it timed to temperature. Then rest through the midday furnace. Then light tasks through late afternoon. Then a second wave of work in the evening as temperatures dropped. Your great-grandparents weren't working less. They were working smarter. Summer kitchens were the architectural expression of this same logic. A separate small building detached from the main house, used for cooking in summer months because the kitchen fire, the fire that had to burn all day to bake bread, render lard, put up preserves, turned the main house into an oven. Isolating that heat source was not optional. It was the difference between tolerable and unlivable. Diet shifted with the season in ways that had real physiological logic. Protein generates heat when you digest it. Up to 30% of protein calories are released as body heat during metabolism. Carbohydrates and fats generate far less. So, summer diets leaned hard into garden produce, tomatoes, cucumbers, green beans, corn, watermelon. The iconic Appalachian summer supper was cornbread crumbled into cold buttermilk, nothing cooked fresh, no oven involved, eaten as the evening cooled. Buttermilk wasn't just tradition, it was cold, it was hydrating, and it was low on the metabolic heat scale. Peppermint tea and topical peppermint were deployed against heat the way modern people deploy ice packs. Menthol, the active compound in peppermint, activates cold-sensitive nerve receptors in the skin without any actual temperature change. Your brain perceives cooling that is physiologically real, even if the thermometer doesn't move. Appalachian women carried dampened handkerchiefs scented with peppermint oil, pressed to the wrist and temples, pulse points where arteries run close to the skin surface. Cooling the blood at those points distributes lower temperatures through the whole circulatory system within minutes. Wet burlap and damp sheets hung in windows provided evaporative cooling in the drier upland areas. Every gallon of water that evaporates removes approximately 8,700 BTU of heat from surrounding air. In a room with moving air and low humidity, a wet sheet in the window could drop interior temperature by 10 to 15 degrees. Humid conditions reduce the effect significantly, which is why you saw this technique more in the drier Appalachian highlands and western plains than in coastal lowlands. Sleeping low, on the floor, was not desperation, it was physics. In any room with warm air at the ceiling, the temperature drops roughly half a degree for every foot lower you go. In a room with a 14-foot ceiling, or the floor can be 7 to 10 degrees cooler than the space where a normal bed sits. Families knew this. Children slept on corn shuck mattresses, dried corn husk stuffing, far cooler and more breathable than feather ticking, on the floor during the worst of summer. Trick 18 through 25, shade, stone, and stillness. The fan that didn't require electricity was the church fan, flat-handled coated board stock, usually bearing a funeral home advertisement on the back. In communities across the rural South, particularly in African American congregations, church fans were the only cooling technology available for gatherings well into the 1960s. The collective fanning of a congregation, dozens of people moving air in the same space, created measurable air circulation. Lillian Baker, Carlisle Porter, described the fans as the first positive African American images that I saw, pre-ebony, pre-jet, bearing scenes of families praying and figures like Booker T. Washington. If you're finding this valuable, hit that like button right now, because what's coming next is the part that building scientists are actively trying to bring back. Tree canopy is the most dramatically underestimated cooling technology in human history. A 2024 meta-analysis published in Nature's Communications Earth and Environment Journal, drawing on 182 studies across 110 cities, found that mature tree coverage reduced pedestrian-level temperatures by up to 21.6 degrees Fahrenheit through combined shade and evapotranspiration, not 2 or 3 degrees, 21. Southern families planted live oaks, tulip poplars, and black walnuts deliberately to shade houses from the west, where the afternoon sun hits walls at the flattest, most heating angle. Vine-covered porches with Virginia creeper, trumpet vine, and wisteria added another layer of living insulation. The U.S. Department of Energy reports that shade trees reduce interior temperatures by up to 20 degrees. Brush arbors were communal shade, built when shade trees weren't available. Rough, open-sided structures of vertical poles topped with cut branches, they could shelter 40 to 50 people and had served as the principal gathering space in American rural religion since the late 1700s. Rock Springs Campground near Denver, also North Carolina, began under a brush arbor in 1829 and has operated continuously ever since. The design was pure function, maximum shade, maximum airflow, and it created a communal cooling space that no individual household could have built alone. High ceilings and raised construction, homes elevated 2 feet or more on brick piers, allowed air to circulate underneath the floorboards. That crawl space acted as a buffer between the hot ground and the living space, and the floor gaps between boards were sometimes intentional ventilation, not shoddy craftsmanship. Meanwhile, 12 to 14-foot ceilings pushed the hottest air above the zone where people lived and moved. Combined with double-hung windows, this made the upper room layer a holding tank for heat that vented through upper sashes while occupants stayed in the cooler, lower volume. Stone and earthen construction provided what building scientists now call thermal mass, dense material, stone, brick, adobe, packed earth, absorb heat slowly during the day and release it slowly at night, smoothing the temperature spikes that lightweight wood frame buildings transmit almost immediately. A study published in Energy, a peer-reviewed journal, found that high thermal mass buildings reduced average indoor temperature by nearly 3 degrees Celsius during heat waves and cut cooling energy demand by 67 to 75% compared to lightweight construction. Appalachian stone farmhouses and spring houses were passively self-moderating in a way that modern stick frame construction cannot match. Seasonal bedding swaps were routine, feather beds and heavy quilts into cedar storage, light cotton sheets and corn shuck mattresses out, and the night ventilation ritual was as regular as locking the door. Shut everything tight at sunrise to trap the cool. Open everything at sunset to flush the day's heat. This daily thermal reset kept interior mass cool enough to absorb the next day's heat without overrunning. It required discipline, not equipment. And the last trick, perhaps the most quietly radical, was the refusal to be in a hurry. The slowness of pre-AC Southern life wasn't poverty or inefficiency, it was thermoregulation. Slow movement generates least metabolic heat. Resting in shade lowers core temperature. Sitting on a porch in still air, fanning slowly with a funeral parlor fan, we're watching the heat shimmer off the fields. That was not idleness. That was a human body managing its energy, precisely the way it evolved to manage it. You are not the problem. Hurrying through 100-degree heat was always the problem. So, why did all of this disappear? Three reasons working together in about 30 years. Speed, industrial, and commercial scale demanded year-round productivity. You can't stop a factory floor for a 3-hour midday rest. You can't tell a department store to close at 10 a.m. because it's too hot. Cost, AC made sealed. Cheap construction suddenly viable. Thin walls, low ceilings, no porches. Houses could be built faster and cheaper if you didn't have to engineer them for climate. The machine would handle comfort. The buyer would handle the electric bill. And a technology arrived that made the old way seem unnecessary overnight. The mass market window air conditioning unit, dropping in price by 97% between the 1950s and today, made every building in America thermally identical regardless of geography, orientation, or design. Historian Raymond Arsenault called it in his landmark 1984 article in the Journal of Southern History. General Electric has proved a more devastating invader than General Sherman. The South was transformed. The front porch became a decoration. The sleeping porch became a storage room. The dog trot became a novelty. The hidden cost arrived on a delay, as it always does. Bodies lost heat acclimatization. Architecture lost regional identity. Community lost the shared outdoor space where it had always gathered. Power bills climbed year after year. And grid dependency turned every heat wave into a crisis, because the same weather event that caused the heat was knocking out the infrastructure people now couldn't survive without. So here's how you start using what your grandparents knew right now, on regardless of where you live. Option 1, easiest. Commit to the night ventilation protocol tonight. When outdoor temperature drops below indoor temperature, typically after sunset, open every window and every interior door fully. Run fans to assist the flush. Close everything tight at first light and keep it closed until outdoor temperature drops again after dark. This single behavior, consistently applied, can drop your indoor temperature 4 to 8 degrees without spending a dollar. Option 2, intermediate. Add shade to your west-facing walls this season. A fast-growing annual vine on a simple trellis, morning glory, scarlet runner bean, or cucumber, will cover significant wall area in one summer. Plant a deciduous tree on the west side, and within 5 years, you will feel the difference in every room on that side of the house. These are not decorations. They are load-bearing elements of your cooling system. Option 3, minimum. Identify your pulse points and keep cold water on them during peak heat. Wrists, neck, and temples. Fill a spray bottle from your coldest tap water. Wet a bandana. Wet a dish towel. These are not comfort measures. They are physiological interventions, cooling the blood supply directly as it passes close to the skin surface, distributing that lower temperature throughout your entire circulatory system within minutes. No machinery required. The men and women who built dog trot houses and carved spring houses into Appalachian hillsides were not primitive. They were applied scientists working with what they had, and what they had was centuries of careful observation about air, water, earth, and human biology. They were masters of passive survivability, which is exactly the phrase that building scientists now use when studying how we make buildings livable without electricity. The knowledge wasn't lost. It was traded away, quietly, deliberately for a product. We're here to dig it back up. Subscribe to this channel if you believe that the knowledge your grandparents lived by deserves to be remembered, not as nostalgia, but as living, workable wisdom for a hotter world. And tell us in the comments, what forgotten skill, food, or practice do you want us to investigate next? We're just getting started.